All right, great. Well, thanks to everyone for joining us today. This is the last presentation in the Digital Curation Interest Group Spring Presentation Series. And it is going to be recorded, and we're going to send out the link afterwards. Feel free to ask questions as we go along in the chat box, and we'll try to answer those as we can. So our presenter today, it's a great pleasure to introduce Andy Osier, who is the Associate Director for Data Services at the Virginia Tech Libraries, and she's going to be talking about a very cool project called VTArtWorks today. So we're excited to have her with us, and with that, I will turn it over to Andy.
Great, thanks, Andrew. I'm going to assume you guys can hear me. With no evidence to the contrary, here we go. Oh no, Monica can't hear anything. I'm going to let Sophie figure that out. Okay, so thanks everybody for being here today. As Andrew said, my name is Andy Osier. I work in the libraries at Virginia Tech. And for the last 3 years or so, I've been working on a project called VTArtWorks. I've given you the slides here. They are on Google Drive if you want to look at them or follow along, or go ahead, get ahead and see the future. They're at goo.gl, and that's a big O, a big T, a little M, a little N, a little L, and a big G. So there we go. They should be able to be seen by everybody. So this is actually VTArtWorks' debut in the library world. I've not spoken about this before, so I'm excited to be sharing this with the ACRL Digital Curation Interest Group. I think it's particularly relevant for this group, and I'm hoping this will be interesting. So as Andrew said, please feel free to ask questions. Just make sure that I can see them in the chat box. I will be happy to answer them as I go along. So if anything doesn't make sense, or if I, drop out of the wireless or something, just please let me know. Okay, so before we get into it, I just wanted to give you guys a quick roadmap of what I'll be talking about today. I'm going to tell you a bit about the project itself, the history of the project, how it came to be, what it kind of involves or centers upon, and a bit about the community that it serves. The community to me is particularly interesting. Then I'm going to move on to why I think it's important and interesting to me, and why I've been working on it for the past 3 years. And then finally, I'll give you guys an update on the current state of the project and outline our plans for the future. So let's start with the basics. What is VTArtWorks? Generally speaking, we use the name to refer to the project, the general initiative, and the team. It's kind of an all-purpose name. In one of my last slides, I'll sort of give you a sense of why we're looking for a new name for this project. So if you've got any suggestions as I go through, please let me know. We're on the hunt for a new name. But for the sake of simplicity, let's just start with the team. So about 3 years ago, Bob Leonard, who you'll see pictured here on the left in the white shirt, doing something theatery, he came to the libraries at Virginia Tech for help with a digital repository. So at the time, I was temporarily covering digital humanities projects for the library. So the powers that be forwarded Bob's email request to me. Through a somewhat unusual confluence of events, one of the institutes at Virginia Tech had been given access to a 2-year subscription to the Vital platform, the VTLS Vital. And Bob was hoping to use it to save a digital collection that had been housed on a website that had been taken offline in 2010. And I'm going to get back to that in a moment. So Bob had created or assembled a team of graduate students to analyze the Vital platform and to get some training on how to move his collection into that platform. So naturally, he was looking for, maybe not naturally, maybe he was just foresighted enough, but he was looking for a representative from the library to work with his team. And that librarian, it turned out, was me. So if you'll remember, about 3 years ago was when VTLS was bought out by Innovative, and through, again, an unusual confluence of events, we were never actually able to get the vital training. But because of that, I ended up talking to Bob quite a bit about the digital collection that he wanted to save and the community that had created it. The community is a field or a discipline or a group of practitioners who Bob refers to as community cultural development, otherwise known as CCD. And I will use that acronym because it's usually easier than saying community cultural development. So, broadly defined, CCD is the work of artist organizers and other community members collaborating to express identity, concerns, and aspirations through the arts and communications media, building collective cultural capacity, and contributing to social and economic justice. In May of 1998, a bunch of artists and art administrators who were focused on making art in, with, and for the communities that they lived in met at Virginia Tech to try to figure out how universities could aid and assist this sort of fledgling group of community-based artists. They came up with an answer. They thought that universities could help with communication and constructive dialogue across or amongst professionals. The emerging field needed help promoting knowledge exchange and the development of critical discourse across practitioners, critical thinkers, and scholars. This is a field that encompasses a wide variety of people doing interesting but related work, or different but related work. So what happened was this group of artists and arts administrators came to Virginia Tech and put together a partnership, a very strong partnership between Virginia Tech's Department of Theater Arts in the person of faculty member Bob Leonard, who's my partner in this project, and a small not-for-profit organization called Art in the Public Interest, led by arts journalists and critics such as Linda Fry Burnham and Steve Derland. And what this partnership did was create an online resource known as the Community Arts Network, or CAN, capital C, capital A, capital N. So again, this is another one of my acronyms for this project. We've got CCD, and now we've got CAN. Okay, so CAN became an online community building resource. It raised the public profile of the field to national recognition, and it pioneered this idea that was central to community cultural development, that of first voice reporting. Community cultural development, or CCD practitioners, really see this as central to civic discourse. So this idea of having the people in the community reporting through their own voice. So CAN, this Community Arts Network, brought the artist, the scholar, the critic, the audience together and allowed for, at the time, it was at the time a robust exchange of knowledge and perspectives. In 2010, Art in the Public Interest ended up taking CAN offline. It didn't have the organizational capacity to grow in response to its success. So this is one of those instances where the collection, the community, was actually too active, and the supporters of CAN couldn't devote the resources to it anymore. The burden of maintaining tens of thousands of hand-coded HTML pages and links became just too resource-intensive to support or to migrate into a new platform, and they just unplugged the machine that it was on. They saved it, but they just unplugged it. And it was actually archived into the Internet Archive. So the website is actually still there, and I've given you a screenshot here of what it looked like. You should be able to just Google Community Arts Network, and I think it's the third or the fourth one down on the Google results, the archive of the site in the Wayback Machine. So this website that was really the center of this fledgling community, its loss, it wasn't a devastating blow. Things still kind of kept going, but it really was this kind of center of discourse for the community. And since 2010, Bob has been looking for a way to save the collection. And that's, again, why he was interested in the Vital platform and how he became connected to the library in particular. So at its core, VTArtWorks is really just an initiative to provide a center for this community, a core for this community, a core that can enable this idea of knowledge exchange, critical discourse, knowledge sharing, documentation, archiving, all this sort of good stuff among CCD practitioners, critical thinkers, and scholars. So this field includes scholars, artists, local organizers, urban and rural planners, and social and economic activists. It is very widespread, both geographically and in terms of discipline. Most of the CCD practitioners that I've met through Bob have been involved in the theater arts, either as theater professors, actors, playwrights, members of theater production teams, but the field also contains writers, critics, art administrators, organizers, arts nonprofits, and actually a large number of students. I've met a number of graduate students who really relied on the original CAN collection and website to learn about things that were going on in the field and get resources for community-based theater productions that they were trying to put into practice. So the theme that really unites all of these sort of separate groups and brings them together is that art has the power to affect positive social and economic change within communities. When it was active, the CAN site held all these groups together and created this sense of community, which in turn really helped grow the field. And when the site went offline in 2010, the community, hearing community members talk about it, it's almost like they lost a core part of their identity. I mean, there is a Facebook page which has a couple of thousand members. Many of the CCD practitioners are active on Twitter, but neither of these technologies, neither of these platforms really became a center for the community. There's no one thing that the entire field is using to communicate. Each group has kind of its own newsletters, its own communication channels, but there's nothing really bringing them together in the absence of CAN. So as Bob and I were talking through the process of saving his collection, his CAN collection, and once we figured out that Vital really wasn't going to work for us, we really started talking about what was kind of missing and what the community kind of needed. And we realized that there's an obvious element missing from these sort of available technologies. And that, missing element really was a shared history. CAN, the collection itself, the collection of writings, of images, of videos, which were once available on the platform, really were an essential grounding part of the community. They provided context, they served as an archive of the community's work, they provoked thought and communication. We realized that the community needs more than just a digital repository or a Facebook page on top of a digital repository. It really needs a platform that actually allows for critical discourse, knowledge exchange, and a shared sense of history and community. So the next logical question is, all right, now that we know that we need something that does both digital repository and communication, how do we find or build or create out of nothing a platform that does this? What does it look like? How can we help this community grow? So to answer these questions, we did what anyone does when they have a question that they want to answer. We wrote a grant. Actually, we wrote a whole lot of grants. We got a few of them, enough to do some sort of initial research to figure out what we actually needed to do. So with a little bit of funding from IMLS, to whom we are very grateful, we hired a couple of grad students, and we started by doing interviews of the 22 CCD practitioners who contributed content and discourse to the original CAN site. So we asked them questions about their use of and contributions to CAN, the tools and platforms they used in its absence, and the issues and challenges that they were facing in their day-to-day work. The data was collected, anonymized to the best of our ability, aggregated, analyzed, and we ended up writing a report, which I will give you a link to in a second, just in case you're interested. As we were doing these interviews, we were also working with a group called the Marcellus Shale Project, which acted as a kind of use case for development of this platform. So the group, the purpose of the group is to put on a series of performances of a play called Marcellus Shale, which, you guessed it, is about Marcellus Shale and fracking concerns, environmental concerns. And it's by a playwright called Paul Zimmett, who's based out of New York City, the off-Broadway scene, and he is part of an ensemble called the Talking Band, and you can Google Talking Band and they should come up. So this group came to Virginia Tech, and their plan is, well, was and is, because it's ongoing, is to put on a production of this play, Marcellus Shale, in a variety of different locations across the United States, with modifications to the play based on the experiences of each individual community and location. So there was a group in Yellow Springs, Ohio, I believe, who took the play, and instead of all the environmental concerns being related to fracking, they were interested in solar farming and the effect that solar farming had on this small community in Ohio. So each group in a different location is taking the play and modifying it according to the local environment. So the whole group, all of the people who were putting on these the versions of this play in all the different places came to Virginia Tech in fall 2015, and they had a workshop. So we really used this as a way to kind of interface with a use case and say, okay, what kinds of concerns do you have? What kinds of issues do you have? What are you interested in knowing from the other projects? What do you think is important to know about the other projects to inform the development of your presentation or your performance? And we talked about how they thought a platform, a new platform, not anything that already existed, could help the groups stay connected and learn from one another. So now we get into a bit that may be a little bit more interesting to the digital curation community. So after the interviews and the discussions, we did a bit of analysis, and we identified 7 main challenges facing this community. And I've listed them out here. There are 7, right? Yeah, I think there are. Good, I can count. So I'll go through a couple of these. Some of them are fairly obvious. Articulating the significance of community-based work, I think, is a concern that is not necessarily unique to community cultural development, but is kind of brought to the forefront. CCD practitioners feel that art needs to move beyond entertainment and needs to be active and present in people's everyday lives. It needs to affect people's everyday lives. Because of this idea, people need to have a clear voice in the CCD projects that go on in their communities. So the projects, the community-based art projects, need to reflect the voices in the communities back into the art. So this is kind of a two-way street kind of idea. So this is a problem, connecting with the audience, connecting with the community, bringing them in and making sure their voices are represented in the community art piece is very important. There's also a concern for the increasing commodification of the arts. CCD aims to frame art and art making as a very holistic and active force in the community. So it's not, art isn't just for the museum. Art is for the everyday life of the community. It's essential. It's like oxygen. It should not be a commodity. It should not be defined in terms of entertainment or monetary value. It needs to be defined by its impact on the community. So there is this concern that art, as art is placed in galleries and exhibitions, and you have to pay to get in, that there is this sense of commodification, that art is for sort of the upper socioeconomic classes and that sort of thing. And that's not what CCD very much wants to bring art into the real lives of everyone. So that's another challenge for them. Another challenge is, of course, this cross-disciplinary nature of the work. I'm not sure why there's a B there. That must be a typo. So crossing disciplinary silos is very challenging. In terms of the work itself, so finding partners in other disciplines, but also in terms of the language and the information categories that are used to describe their work. They don't like rigid information categories. They want to be able to use sort of an ever-changing, flexible language for the work that they're doing. And then this one for me is the most interesting, so I've bolded it so that you know it's the most interesting to me: overcoming the failure of traditional documentation methods. So I think this was actually a quote from one of the interviewees. I'm not sure that I would agree that traditional documentation methods have failed, but from the perspective of CCD practitioners, documentation doesn't always capture the ephemeral nature of art. So when you're talking about a theater performance, how do you really capture the essence of a performance and the effect it may have on an audience or community? That's a very living in the moment thing. So it's very difficult to document that process, to capture that feeling. And the problem of documenting with communities and not just for communities. So making sure the community or the audience has a voice in how they're represented. And then there's also sort of a field-wide lack of resources for documentation efforts. I mean, it takes a tremendous amount of effort just to put on a performance like Marcellus Shale or whatever kind of art. Whatever kind of art event is going on in a community. It's very difficult to document that as well. If it's not, it's not easy. There's no easy solution for all of this. Difficulty finding appropriate funding sources. This is, a problem for everyone. Lack of central communication and a news source for the field of community cultural development. And, each group, as I said, has their own newsletters. Some of them are print-based, some of them are email newsletters, some of them are website newsletters. But there's a certain amount of resource intensiveness to getting the news out there. There are conferences, there are larger umbrella organizations, but there's no real central communication or news source. And then insufficient training resources and entry portals for the field. It can be difficult as a student or a practitioner who's interested in interested in sort of community-based art to get the resources and figure out who to talk to. So you can find a bit of a more detailed analysis of these challenges in the white paper that we released at the end of the grant-funded project. So I've given you a link there, and I believe it's on the next slide as well. Good, great. So we proposed, so at the end of the analysis, we proposed the development of a lightweight web and preferably also a mobile platform that combines this idea of a central news source for the field, journal-style source for sort of critical discourse, software tools for documenting CCD projects. So if something could be developed that could make documentation of those, real-life events easier. Archival access to a database of completed projects, so that sense of a history of the field, how things are connected. An obvious entry portal for practitioners from outside the field into the field, training resources, information about funding opportunities and strategies, and networking tools to connect with communities and professionals outside the field. So something that really provides kind of a center like CAN did, the original CAN community, but also allows an entry point for people outside the field to come in as well. So at this point, I just wanted to take a step back and go, why is this important? Why am I spending my time working on this? And I can hear all of you thinking, why is Andy spending all of her time working on this? Well, it's not all of my time. It's sometimes large, sometimes small amount of my time. But why is this important? Let's start with my organization, my university. So why is this important to Virginia Tech? Well, Virginia Tech is entering into a new sort of phase of emphasis. We've got this focus now on destination areas, which are sort of recognized areas where Virginia Tech researchers can excel, and interdisciplinary research. So there's a big focus on interdisciplinary research. There's also, because of this, an interest in tracking metrics for determining the value of artistic efforts. So I've given you a couple of screenshots of Google Scholar and Altmetric. The arts community, the Institute for Creativity, Art and Technology, and the School of Performing Arts are actually very interested in things like Altmetrics for the purposes of sort of tracking interest in or value or impact of art within Virginia Tech, sort of the larger scholarly community, and for that matter in the sort of non-scholarly community as well. And again, as with any discussion of metrics, we're not talking about, assigning, we're not really talking about like assigning actual value to metrics, but just a sense of, being able to kind of track the spread of something to see how far it goes. That's kind of interesting to Virginia Tech, I think. There are also a variety of related efforts. There's the A2RU, which is the Alliance for Arts and Research Universities. They're developing a third space platform for peer review of transdisciplinary work, which is very interesting. And there's also an Exceed initiative out of Carnegie Mellon, which is doing some really fascinating stuff with curating communities and providing that sort of central point for critical discourse. So this isn't isolated to Virginia Tech. I think this is part of a larger conversation about the value. Again, I hate using the word value, but that's kind of the best word that I can use right now. But the effect of the arts on kind of a larger scope. So that's one reason that I've been working on this. Another reason is that this idea is really important to community cultural development. that connection, being able to provide that connection across disciplines, across silos, across experiences is actually really interesting. And, you know, ultimately, why I ask myself this question all the time: why is this important? My job is to build a data services unit inside of a university library, so why am I messing around with all this art stuff? Well, there are very interesting parallels to the academic research process. There's this idea of the data of the arts and the data of community engagement initiatives that I'm not sure has really been explored. You know, there's a certain uniqueness to this idea of data within arts, and there are also a lot of commonalities as well. And I was also really struck by this idea of building a repository for shared history for an already engaged community. I mean, I know that there are institutional and data and subject repositories all over the place now, and I mean, I don't know about everyone else's institution. Maybe you can tell me about it in the chat, but you know, we've had to spend a lot of time trying to build capacity, to build interest, to engage our community, our university community, with the repositories. And this, you know, from talking with Bob and talking with the stakeholders and the interviewees, this is a community that is primed and ready for some kind of a repository that they can center around. And I thought it would be really interesting to see what is that like. That's a very interesting idea. If we can have people who are willing to give input and talk to us and do beta testing and really engage with, you know, content that they're developing every day, what does that really look like? So that's another reason that I thought this project was actually very interesting. So at this point, let's see, does anyone have a question? I'm going to take silence as a no, I suppose, and just keep going. All right, I'm going to keep going. So we did all this original research. We are currently in development with a web development group called Collab Cooperative, who are great. They are working on wireframes. They are exploring platforms. They seem to really enjoy Hydra and Fedora and Hydrax in particular, so that may be an interesting development in this project. We have a steering committee made up of leaders in the community cultural development field who meet monthly and advise on things like initial groups of content developers. So we're looking for kind of groups to pilot. Collab is going to be delivering a sort of first version of the platform fairly soon, and we want to start getting users in there to start putting their content in, seeing how it all connects. We're talking about creating documentation best practices specifically for these sort of ephemeral arts events. So what is the data for a theater performance? You know, it could be images of rehearsals. It could be, you know, anything from a video of the event or of a rehearsal to comments to tweets from audience members to just about anything. Or it could even be something as simple as, you know, grocery lists for stage props or something like that. All of this is kind of worth documenting. It could be useful to these other community-based groups. You may not be able to see this, but the second to last bullet at the bottom is setting up a timeline for alpha and kind of beta testing. So we are anticipating some testing of the system, user design testing, that sort of thing. And then obviously more fundraising and grant writing to pay for all of this. That is the trick of grant writing. Once you start, you can never stop. Okay, So where are we going? And this is my last slide. We are also working on sustainability plans and community engagement. So currently, we've got a web development team contracted, Collab, to kind of develop the platform, but they're not going to be able to sustain it forever. So in an ideal scenario, what I would love to do is be able to bring this platform that serves this community into the library's development environment. And there's a certain amount of trust and community engagement that's going to have to happen before we can, migrate the platform, if we ever even can migrate the platform. I hope we can, but I don't know. A lot of times, communities who develop these sort of applications, in order to sustain them, they give them over to groups that may not be able to have the same level of control over them. There may not be that kind of trust between the community and the sort of sustaining organization. And if Virginia Tech is going to be able to take over this platform, if it even wants to, we're going to have to be very transparent about everything and build that trust in the first place. Governance is a big question. Community curation is a big question. Who's going to decide who's part of the community, who's not part of the community? Who's going to decide what changes need to be made, what updates need to be made? Who's going to work with the development group? Those sorts of questions. And then we're also thinking about how to articulate the value of the arts within these communities. Why we're perpetually trying to answer this question, why is this initiative important? And how to articulate the value of sort of exploring with this community and, with community cultural development. That's why I use the acronym, because then I end up saying the word community too many times. Articulating the value of the work of community cultural development within sort of local communities. And then we're also going to be working to assess the project as a whole. But maybe the most important thing is we need to come up with a new name. It's not just about Virginia Tech. We've been using VTArtWorks as kind of a working name for quite a while, and we need to come up with something new, something that doesn't tie to VT, something that doesn't necessarily evoke the original CAN, Community Arts Network. So that's still kind of an in-process thing, but we know that, a new name, branding, that kind of thing is incredibly important to just about any and all projects. So in a nutshell, in about half an hour, that's kind of an update on this project. I think it's really interesting. It's definitely gotten me out of the normal, run of the normal job of being a databrarian. And, as I said, there's some really interesting parallels between this community and the community of researchers that I work with here at Virginia Tech. So I'm still kind of synthesizing everything and trying to see if there is something that can be learned, maybe, from each group. So, questions? No questions? Was I on mute this whole time? I probably was.
I have a question for you while
yes.
other people are thinking time here. So, and apologies if I missed this somewhere, but is the platform or the vision for the platform for it all to be sort of openly / publicly available, or are there pieces of it that are going to be, just available to the community or just available to certain users or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've got kind of two levels of answers for that. One, from the start, we've wanted the infrastructure itself to be openly available. So we wanted to build something that could, if we were going to build something totally new, which I think we're just going to end up using things that have already been built in new ways, but we want to make sure that that is usable beyond this particular community cultural development context. So in that sense, whatever's developed, whatever infrastructure is developed, whatever connections are made will be sort of openly released for the community or any community to use, should it be useful to them, to their context. In terms of the content of the platform itself, yeah, I mean, I think you know, the work that's been done with sort of digital repositories and data repositories is going to inform a lot of that, where there are going to need to be levels of openness. And I think we're going to, you know, that's one of the interesting parallels. You know, I think researchers and these artists have a lot of the same concerns about, you know, release of their work. Some of the stuff it's fine to release. Some of the stuff they want to be out there as wide as possible, and some of the stuff they want to keep very sort of close to the chest. So in terms of like levels of access and governance, that's something that I think that the repository community has already kind of worked through a little bit and can sort of speak to. But ultimately, my hope is that the community itself will be able to say, yes, we want, you know, these 3 levels of access, and they should have some voice in that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Andy? Great. Well, hearing none, I just would like everyone to join me in thanking Andy for really very fascinating presentation today. As I mentioned, we will be making this recording and along with the other recordings from our Spring DCIG presentation series available on our ALA Connect page, and we'll link to Andy's slides as well. So thank you so much, Andy. This is a really great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
We will be sending out some follow-up information. And as I mentioned, this is the last of our Spring DCIG presentation. So our next event will be at ALA Annual, which we'll be sending out information about soon. So thank you all, and thanks again, Andy.